Your authenticity may threaten people. Being authentic in a world that rewards performance can feel like a revolutionary act. When you show up without pretense, honest about your values, clear in your boundaries, comfortable in your skin, you don't just express yourself. You challenge others. You expose the masks they wear, the compromises they've made, the versions of themselves they perform just to be accepted. And for some people, that confrontation is intolerable, not because of anything you've done wrong, but because your presence reminds them of everything they've silenced in themselves. Your confidence, even if quiet, may feel like arrogance to someone who doesn't believe they're worthy. Your kindness may feel fake to someone who has never received genuine care without conditions. Your success, your creativity, your refusal to conform, it can all be misinterpreted, not because of who you are, but because of what it awakens in others. And when people feel threatened but can't articulate why, they often respond with subtle forms of resistance: criticism, coldness, exclusion, or passive aggression. They might even invent reasons to dislike you, because admitting that your authenticity unsettles them would require more self-awareness than they're ready to face. This is especially true in environments where conformity is the unspoken rule. If you've ever walked into a room and felt tension even before you spoke, it could be because your presence disrupts the unspoken hierarchy or emotional code. You become a mirror reflecting either what they're suppressing or what they wish they had the courage to embrace. And mirrors can be uncomfortable. So instead of getting curious, some people choose to get defensive. Instead of leaning in, they pull away. Instead of asking themselves, why does this person's freedom bother me? They'll say, I just don't like them. But authenticity isn't about being liked. It's about being aligned with your truth, your purpose, and your core values. The more you express yourself honestly, the more you'll attract the people who resonate and repel the ones who can't handle that level of transparency. That's not rejection, it's clarification, a natural filter. Authenticity sorts your world. It reveals who's with you for the real you, and who was only comfortable with the version of you that played small. Point 1. It's not always about you. One of the most liberating truths you can accept in life is this: people's reactions to you are often more about them than about you. When someone dislikes you, especially for reasons that feel unclear or unjustified, your instinct might be to internalize it. You replay conversations, reanalyze your tone, question your actions, and start blaming yourself for something you might not have even done. But the truth is, people walk around with a world inside them that you can't see, a backlog of emotional wounds, traumas, unmet needs, insecurities, and internalized narratives that color the way they perceive others. You may remind someone of a person who hurt them. You may embody a trait they were told was wrong, like boldness, self-assurance, or independence. Sometimes just being happy or at peace with yourself is enough to make someone uncomfortable if they've never allowed themselves to feel that way. And instead of confronting their discomfort, it's easier to project it outward. That projection lands on you, and it feels personal, but it's not. People's dislike of you can stem from envy they don't know how to name, resentment they've never processed, or emotional baggage they haven't unpacked. You just happen to be standing in the path of their storm. If you try to fix yourself in response to their dislike, you'll end up betraying your authenticity for the sake of appeasing an issue that never originated with you. You'll keep adjusting yourself to match the lens through which someone else is projecting their pain. But you are not responsible for their healing. You are only responsible for your integrity. Understanding that it's not always about you isn't a dismissal of personal accountability. It's a redirection of emotional energy. It keeps you from wasting time trying to solve someone else's unspoken issue with your existence. It teaches you to stand firm in who you are, even when others can't receive it. Because what's triggering to them might be transformational to someone else. And what one person resents about you might be exactly what another admires. Assumptions and misjudgments are common in a fast-paced world, where opinions are formed in seconds, and entire stories are constructed from single posts, glances, or rumors. Assumptions have become the default mode of interaction. Someone might dislike you, not because of what you've said or done, but because of what they've heard, what they've imagined, or what they've projected onto you. You could be the subject of a conversation you weren't even part of, judged for a decision they didn't understand, or labeled based on a moment they misunderstood, and yet, they carry that impression as if it's truth. People don't often pause to gather facts or seek clarity. They react. They fill in the blanks with their own biases and past experiences. Maybe you didn't smile back because you were preoccupied, but they decided you were arrogant. Maybe you declined an invitation because you were protecting your peace, but they assumed you were antisocial or rude. This type of misjudgment happens more than we admit, and the danger is when we start adjusting ourselves to prevent it. The truth is, you can live with integrity, speak with honesty, and show up with kindness, and still be misunderstood. You might still be disliked based on someone else's incorrect conclusions, and it's not your job to run around correcting everyone's perception. That's an exhausting, endless mission that steals energy from your actual growth. When you understand how quickly people jump to conclusions, you become more compassionate toward yourself. You stop taking every cold glance or passive-aggressive tone so seriously. You begin to realize that much of what people think about you has more to do with their imagination than your reality. This doesn't mean you dismiss feedback or avoid accountability, but it does mean you stop defining your worth through the lens of people who never took the time to understand you. Assumptions are easy, self-awareness is rare, and when someone chooses the former, that's a reflection of their inner world, not your value. 2. Unexplainable dislike is real, but rarely personal. There are times when people dislike you and can't even explain why. You might walk into a room, introduce yourself with sincerity, and still be met with indifference or even hostility. What's confusing is that you've done nothing wrong. You've spoken kindly, you've been respectful, and yet, something in their demeanor changes around you. This unexplainable tension can lead to internal questioning. Did I say something weird? Do I look off? Did I offend them somehow? But in many cases, their reaction has nothing to do with you. People often carry internal maps shaped by their past, how they were raised, what they've been through, who they've trusted and been hurt by, and what they fear deep down. Sometimes, your personality, presence, or even physical features remind them of someone who caused them pain. Other times, your energy might simply not resonate with theirs. It's irrational, but human. Just like we can feel inexplicably drawn to someone, we can also feel distant from others for no logical reason. This can be especially disorienting for those who are empathetic or sensitive to the emotions of others. You may find yourself desperately trying to make it better, not realizing you're trying to solve a problem that didn't begin with you. Their dislike might stem from internal discomfort, unhealed trauma, or even misplaced jealousy, but because it lacks clear reasoning, it becomes even more frustrating to endure. It can feel unjust. But the sooner you realize that you don't need to understand their reaction to validate your own worth, the freer you become. Some people just won't vibe with you, and that's okay. You are not everyone's cup of tea, and you're not supposed to be. The idea that you should be universally liked is not only unrealistic, it's emotionally harmful. Chemistry, connection, and resonance are complex things. Sometimes, two people simply don't click, and there's no deeper explanation needed. You could have the same values, similar interests, even mutual friends, and yet, there's no emotional rapport, no warmth, no pull. And when you experience that, the mind often wants to dig for a reason, to make sense of it. But here's the truth. Human energy is unpredictable. Some people just won't feel you, not because there's anything wrong with you, but because your essence doesn't align with theirs. Maybe your directness clashes with their sensitivity. Maybe your calmness feels like detachment to someone who thrives on high energy. Maybe your quiet confidence comes off as cold to someone who expects loud friendliness. It's not personal, it's preference. And understanding this takes you out of the exhausting cycle of questioning yourself over and over again. What matters more than being liked by everyone is being at peace with yourself. It's about knowing that who you are, at your core, is not up for constant modification. When someone doesn't vibe with you, that's their right. You don't need to retaliate, over-explain, or try to win them over. You can allow them their space while remaining centered in your own energy. The more comfortable you are with people not liking you, the more space you make for people who do. Set boundaries with grace, not guilt. When someone dislikes you or treats you coldly, it can be tempting to tiptoe around them, overextend yourself to be liked, or even suppress your voice to avoid confrontation. But that creates a cycle where your self-worth becomes tethered to other people's moods. Instead, you need boundaries, not walls, not vengeance, but clear and healthy emotional lines. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about choosing where your energy flows, what you tolerate, and how you allow yourself to be treated. Setting boundaries might feel unnatural if you're used to people-pleasing or caretaking, but they are an essential form of self-respect. When someone disrespects you, mocks your choices, or passively undermines you, it's not petty to pull back, it's powerful. You're teaching people how to treat you not just by what you allow, but also by what you no longer accept. And this doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes the most profound boundary is silence, detachment, no explanation needed. Graceful boundaries also help you respond rather than react. Instead of getting consumed by the emotional chaos of being disliked, you can hold your ground with calm assurance. You don't have to shrink to avoid being targeted. You don't have to explode to be heard. Boundaries allow you to exist in your truth without apology, even when others project discomfort, jealousy, or misunderstanding onto you. Focus on who does appreciate you. It's easy to get fixated on the one person who doesn't like you, even if you're surrounded by 10 others who do. That's human nature. We tend to zero in on rejection because it feels like a threat to our sense of belonging. But spending your energy trying to gain the approval of someone who resists you, misunderstands you, or silently judges you, is a losing game. The real shift happens when you stop trying to convert critics and start pouring into your supporters. Think about the people who light up when you walk into a room, the ones who ask how you're doing and really mean it. The friends who respect your boundaries, who celebrate your wins without competition, who understand your silences and honor your quirks. These people exist. And when you focus on them, your world expands, your confidence grows, your nervous system relaxes. You realize that you were never meant to chase love. You were meant to stand in your light and let the right people find you. Appreciation is magnetic. The more you acknowledge and invest in those who truly see you, the less interested you become in being seen by those who refuse to look. You don't need validation from the loudest critic, when the quiet ones in your corner have been rooting for you all along. And when you anchor yourself in real support, the noise from those who dislike you starts to lose its grip. Healing from rejection builds inner strength. Rejection, especially the kind that comes with no explanation, cuts deep. It can make you question your worth, doubt your instincts, and close off parts of yourself to avoid future pain. But if you approach rejection with curiosity rather than shame, it can become one of your greatest teachers. It strips away the illusion that everyone will like you, and forces you to develop a stronger, more honest relationship with yourself. Healing from being disliked is not about becoming bitter or building emotional walls. It's about anchoring inward, finding validation within rather than constantly seeking it outside. You begin to learn the difference between constructive criticism and emotional projection. You stop begging for closure and start giving it to yourself. You learn to sit with discomfort, rather than rushing to fix or avoid it. You realize that not being liked doesn't make you less lovable, it just makes you human. And over time, this healing process strengthens your identity. You move from needing to be chosen to choosing yourself, from tiptoeing to standing tall, from over-explaining to simply walking away. Because when you've survived being misunderstood, excluded, or dismissed and still come back to your authentic self, that's power, that's growth, that's the kind of self-worth no one can take from you. Emotional projections are often invisible to the one projecting. One of the most common reasons people dislike others, for no reason, is emotional projection. This psychological defense mechanism occurs when someone unconsciously takes traits, feelings or fears they don't want to acknowledge in themselves, and assigns them to someone else. You may find yourself being called arrogant, fake, or selfish, not because you've displayed those behaviors, but because the person saying it is wrestling with those feelings internally. They can't face their own flaws, so they project them onto you. The trickiest part about emotional projection is that the person doing it is often completely unaware it's happening. They truly believe their perception of you is accurate, because it feels real to them. But it's not reality, it's their internal world, leaking into their outer one. You simply happened to become the canvas for their unresolved emotions. And when this happens, their dislike isn't about anything you've actually said or done. It's about what your presence stirs in them subconsciously. It could be envy, inadequacy, or discomfort with your confidence, happiness, or even just your calmness. Whatever it is, they see you not as you, but as a symbol of something within themselves they haven't healed. Recognizing projection in others can be liberating. Instead of personalizing their reactions, you begin to understand that their dislike might be more about their struggle than your flaw. It allows you to stop shrinking to soothe their discomfort, and start separating their issues from your identity. Past versions of you may haunt the present. Another reason someone might dislike you for no reason is because they're relating to an outdated version of who you used to be. People often form opinions based on a single interaction, a moment from years ago, or second-hand information that no longer reflects your current self. Maybe you were awkward, angry, or defensive during a difficult chapter of life, and someone encountered you in that moment. Instead of updating their view as you've evolved, they've frozen you in time. This can feel deeply frustrating, like being held hostage by your past. You've done the work, healed, grown, become more self-aware, but they still see you through an old lens. Their dislike isn't rooted in the person you are today, but in a snapshot of who you used to be. And if they're unwilling to see the changes, they may continue to relate to you as if you've stayed the same. The truth is, not everyone will allow you to outgrow your past, especially if your growth challenges their narrative. Your transformation might remind them of their own stagnation, and instead of celebrating your progress, they resent it. That resentment can show up as subtle dislike, condescension, or even outright hostility, but you don't owe anyone the job of convincing them you've changed. Your life is the evidence, and those willing to see you clearly will recognize that who you were is not who you are. Envy often masquerades as disdain. People rarely admit to feeling envious, especially not outwardly. Instead, that envy often disguises itself as judgment, criticism, or cold behavior. If someone feels threatened by your achievements, your relationships, your self-worth, or even your peace, they might convince themselves they just don't like you. It's easier than confronting their own sense of inadequacy. You might notice it in passive-aggressive comments, backhanded compliments, or exclusion from certain conversations or groups. Sometimes they'll gossip, dismiss your efforts, or minimize your wins, and all of this will be presented as rational dislike, when in reality it's emotional comparison. They see something in you they don't think they can have, be or reach, and instead of being inspired, they become resentful. Envy is deeply uncomfortable, and people rarely want to sit with it long enough to ask what it's trying to teach them. So instead, they target the object of that envy, you. The challenge is not to absorb their projections, or let their energy diminish yours. It's to recognize that their reaction says more about their internal voids than your external expression. The more you embody self-worth unapologetically, the more you might trigger envy in those who haven't cultivated their own. That's not your fault, and it's not your job to dim your light to protect their comfort. Your energy might be misunderstood. Energy speaks before words ever do. The way you carry yourself, your facial expressions, your tone, your silence, all of it communicates. And sometimes, your energy can be misread by people who don't understand you. If you're introverted, you might come across as aloof. If you're focused, people might see you as intense. If you're reserved, others might think you're cold or unfriendly. These misinterpretations are not a reflection of who you are, but of how others perceive through their limited filters. People often judge others not based on intention, but on impact, how your energy makes them feel. And if they're used to superficial conversations, or performative behavior, your depth, honesty, or calm presence might feel strange or even intimidating. Some people aren't used to authenticity. When they meet someone who doesn't fake emotions or force socialization, it unsettles them. They might label you as difficult, moody, or off simply because your energy doesn't match their expectations. The more aligned you become with your own frequency, the less likely it is that everyone will understand it. But being misunderstood doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're being real. And sometimes, realness is unfamiliar, and therefore uncomfortable, for people who are still figuring out how to be themselves. Social group dynamics and herd mentality influence perception. In many environments, workplaces, schools, communities, or social circles, people's opinions are often shaped by group dynamics more than personal experience. If one influential person decides they don't like you, others may follow suit simply to stay aligned with the group. This herd mentality causes people to adopt biases that aren't even their own. You might be disliked by someone who has never spoken to you, simply because someone they trust said something negative about you. This kind of social conditioning is frustrating, because it removes agency from individuals, and creates echo chambers of misunderstanding. People begin to mirror each other's judgments, without ever forming independent opinions. Gossip spreads, reputations form, and suddenly you're cast in a role you didn't choose. It's not about who you are, it's about maintaining the unspoken social order. In these situations, trying to clear your name, or win people over, can be draining and ineffective. The better approach is to remain consistent in your truth, and let time reveal who's thinking for themselves. People with emotional maturity will eventually see through the groupthink, and those who don't, they were never going to give you a fair chance to begin with. You might represent something they rejected in themselves. Sometimes, the reason someone dislikes you has little to do with who you are, and everything to do with who they used to be, or who they wanted to become, but didn't allow themselves to be. You might unknowingly represent a version of themselves they abandoned. Your courage reminds them of the chances they didn't take. Your authenticity highlights the masks they still wear. Your freedom to speak your mind exposes how often they stay silent. They don't just dislike you, they dislike the confrontation your presence forces within them. This kind of aversion is almost always subconscious. They're not sitting there plotting to despise you, they just feel uncomfortable around you, even if they can't articulate why. Deep down, you mirror the parts of themselves they tried to bury. And since it's too painful to admit that to themselves, they externalize it onto you. You become the symbol of the dreams they gave up, the voice they silenced, the path they were too afraid to walk.
And instead of facing that inner conflict, they redirect it as criticism, passive aggression, or avoidance. Your existence becomes a reminder of their self-betrayal, and that's not something most people are willing to sit with. So instead they take the easier route, they reject you, because it feels safer than acknowledging what your presence reveals about their own unlived life. Dislike can be a reflection of unhealed childhood wounds. People carry the emotional patterns of their childhood far longer than they realize. The way they react to you might not be about you at all, but rather how you unconsciously activate something unresolved in their past. You may remind someone of a parent who was emotionally distant, a sibling who overshadowed them, or a peer who humiliated them. They might not even be aware of the connection, but their nervous system reacts instantly and irrationally.
In these cases, dislike is not logical. It's primal. It's the inner child inside them flinching at your voice,
Your tone, your posture, or your behavior, because it resembles something that once hurt them, and since they haven't confronted or healed that pain, they relate to you with the same emotional lens. You could be gentle, thoughtful, and intentional, but their response is rooted in survival mode, not present-day reality. This type of reaction is particularly common in environments with power dynamics, like workplaces or families, where unhealed authority issues, or rivalry-based trauma, can get activated. The problem is, when someone dislikes you, because you trigger their past, there's often no solution you can offer. The real work belongs to them, to examine where that pain came from, and how it's coloring their relationships today. Online persona versus real-life presence creates dissonance. In today's world, many people encounter you first through a screen. They form opinions based on your social media presence, public work, or online reputation. But when they meet you in real life, or interact more personally, there's sometimes a disconnect. Maybe you seem bolder online, and more introverted in person. Maybe they expected you to be louder, funnier, more approachable. And when your actual presence doesn't match their internal image, it creates cognitive dissonance, and sometimes disappointment or dislike. This isn't your fault, but it does explain why people may have strange or inconsistent reactions to you. The curated digital self they thought they knew doesn't always reflect the full reality of who you are. Some people may even project an entire personality onto you based on one post or video, and when you don't conform to it, they reject the real version of you as inauthentic, simply because it doesn't match their imagined one. This kind of mismatch is increasingly common in the age of parasocial relationships. People think they know you, but they only know fragments, and when confronted with your depth, nuance or contradiction, it unsettles them. They were comfortable with the version of you that lived in their head. The real complex human you is harder to place, and sometimes harder to like. You're a mirror for their insecurity. There's a quiet discomfort that comes when someone else is comfortable in their own skin. If you walk into a room and carry yourself with confidence, self-assurance, or calm presence, it can stir something in those who are still searching for theirs. Your ease makes their anxiety feel louder. Your clarity makes their confusion more apparent. Your self-acceptance makes their self-doubt harder to ignore. In this way, you become a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see reflected back. They may begin to compete with you without reason, criticize you under the guise of feedback, or ice you out to reassert their own social control. And you'll be left wondering, what did I do? The truth is, you simply were. You were enough. You were whole. And that wholeness unintentionally exposed the places where they still feel broken. It's important to remember that you're not responsible for how your presence makes others feel about themselves. If being your authentic self causes someone to spiral into self-comparison or passive aggression, that reaction is theirs to manage, not yours to fix. You disrupt the social hierarchy without trying. In many group settings, whether it's at work, school, or within social circles, there's an unspoken hierarchy. Some people are seen as leaders, others as followers, and many cling to their place in the order because it provides a sense of identity and security. When you enter those environments and bring fresh energy, ideas, or confidence, you may unintentionally disrupt that hierarchy. You don't play by the established pecking order, and that makes some people deeply uncomfortable. You might not even be trying to lead, impress, or dominate, but your mere presence shifts the dynamic. You ask the questions no one asks. You don't defer to status just because it's expected. You carry yourself with self-respect, and don't shrink in the face of power. And for people who've built their self-worth on being above others, this feels like a threat. Their dislike for you isn't really about your behavior, it's about what your behavior does to their illusion of control. This form of dislike is especially common when you're new in a space, rising quickly, or simply unwilling to conform. People who are invested in maintaining their position may view your authenticity as rebellion, even if all you're doing is being yourself. You're not attacking them, but you're disrupting a system they benefit from, and that makes you a target. You might radiate the kind of freedom they've denied themselves. Freedom isn't just about what you do, it's about how you carry yourself. When someone walks through life with emotional independence, self-trust, and the courage to break social expectations, it shows. And people who have chosen comfort over courage often feel conflicted around that kind of energy. They both admire it and resent it. Because while your freedom represents what's possible, it also reminds them of the choices they didn't make. You might dress how you want, speak openly, pursue unconventional dreams, or refuse to settle, and those choices signal to others that they too had a choice. That's liberating for some. But for others, it's infuriating. Because your freedom implies that maybe their restrictions were self-imposed, that maybe they didn't have to stay small, quiet, or agreeable, that maybe their life could have looked different if they'd allowed themselves to take a risk. And so rather than celebrating your courage, they judge it. Not because it's wrong, but because it reminds them of what they buried to feel safe. You didn't break the rules out loud, you simply refused to follow the silent ones. And for some people, that's reason enough not to like you.